morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are here this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live using Zoom on Sunday morning, and welcome to those of you who are watching the recording of this service later on Chalice's YouTube channel. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that you have a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service, and you can click on it to hide the subtitle or show the subtitle. You're in control of whether that function is on or off on your screen. Also on your menu is the chat button. For those of you who like to use chat during the service, which you're welcome to do, people are saying hello, greeting each other. Please be sure that when you post that you've used that little blue menu to select everyone. We like to use the chat for everyone to talk together. If you only chat with the host, that's me, and it's unlikely that I'll be able to see it and respond during the service. So let's all give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome. If you share space with someone and consent to hugging each other, go ahead. Finally, I want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice this morning. Towards the end of the service, I'll put a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. Our weekly email is the best way to get information about our groups and activities, most of which are still meeting online using Zoom. And once you're on our email list, you'll also get information about our monthly newcomer gathering towards the end of the month. Now, let's take a breath together.
A land acknowledgement is an honest and historically accurate way to recognize the traditional First Nations of a place. It commemorates Indigenous peoples' principal kinship to the land and the fact that they have not been and cannot be erased from their collective First Mother, the land. It is a starting place to change how the land is seen and talked about, according to Wanda Nannybush of the Anishinaabe Nation in Ontario. For non-Indigenous communities, a land acknowledgement is a powerful way of showing respect and honor for the Indigenous people of the land on which we work and live. It is a way of resisting the erasure of Indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. It is a stepping stone to honoring broken treaty relationships. It is an act of reconciliation. Land acknowledgements are not about placing blame, nor are they intended to restore white comfort. They are prayerful, they are personal, with carefully chosen and accurate language. In honoring Indigenous peoples, we strive to learn the pronunciation of their names. Land acknowledgements recognize how systemic and institutional systems of power have oppressed Indigenous people, and how that oppression has historically influenced the way non-Indigenous peoples perceive and interact with them, in the past as well as in the present. And so, I offer this land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I live, work, and raise my family on stolen land, the ancestral homeland of the Piamkouicham and the Kumeyaay nations, a people who have been living, working, and raising families on this land of their ancestors for countless generations. People who have an enduring connection to this land that can never be erased. People for whom their deep relationship with this land of their ancestors is inseparable from who they are. People who consider this land and everything around them to be part of their enduring family.
Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. May our chalice flame burn brightly, that all who are seeking may find us. Our service this morning honors the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, which begins at sunset this coming Wednesday and concludes the next day, Thursday, at sunset. The words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Leah Onjiri. This is the season of repair, a time to reflect on how we might endure when life tears at us. We are held by the great book of life, in which it is written that we will inevitably face deprivation and discomfort, longing and forgiveness. Each among us must contemplate our own place in it all. As those of us in relationship with Judaism mark the high holy days, our hearts fill with hope and fear, turning and settling, mystery and agency, accountability and acceptance. Let us gather today in somber celebration of our shared humanity and our personal power. Let us worship together. You're invited to join in singing.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where his feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw flame. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by sharing and honoring our joys and sorrows. If you'd like to share a joy or sorrow this morning, now's the time for sharing in the chat box. These aren't spoken out loud and don't become part of the recording. If you'd like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow or to make a prayer request, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat box.
all this sorrow, all this purpose, all this pain, such is life, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is love, such is love. All this joy, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this purpose, all this pain, such is love, such is love, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is love, such is love. All this joy, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this sorrow, all this purpose, all this pain, such is life, such is life, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is love, such is love. All this joy, all this joy, all this sorrow, all this sorrow, all this purpose, all this pain, such is life, such is life, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is peace, such is love, such is love.
Our story today is called The Hardest Word, written by Jacqueline Jules and illustrated by Catherine Janice Kahn. This story is written in honor of the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur. A long, long time ago, the world had many large and fabulous creatures. One of those creatures was a gigantic yellow bird with deep red wings and a purple forehead. He was called the Ziz. The Ziz was so huge that when he spread out his wings, he blocked the sun, as if he were a dark rain cloud. Every time he flew over a town, all the mothers would call to their children, "Come inside quickly before it rains." This made the Ziz sad. He loved children, and he didn't want to spoil their playtime. So the Ziz started flying around at night, when no one would notice that he made the sky dark with his gigantic wings. That worked fine for a while. Then one night the Ziz flew too high, and he bumped into a star. Sizzle, snap, bang! The star fell out of the sky and down to earth. It burned a big hole in the ground. The next morning, when the Ziz saw the hole, he was worried. "What can I do to cover this hole?" he asked himself. He thought about it for a while and came up with an idea. He stretched out his huge wings and went back up into the sky. This time he knocked down a cloud. Plop! The cloud was full of rain, and it filled the big hole with water. Now the big hole was a lovely pond, perfect for swimming. All the children came running to the pond, screaming with delight. It was a hot, sunny day, and they had a wonderful time splashing and playing in the water. "That mistake is all fixed," the Ziz smiled. One day, however, the Ziz made a mistake he could not fix. It was the week before Yom Kippur. He was flying along, not watching where he was going, and he flew smack into the tallest pine tree in the world. Boom! The tree fell over and knocked over another tree. That tree knocked down another tree, and that tree fell on the vegetable garden behind the synagogue. Smash! Squash! Oops! Oh no! The Ziz covered his eyes with his big wings. Not the vegetable garden. It belongs to the children. The Ziz uncovered his eyes to look at the damage. The tomatoes, the corn, the pumpkins, the beans, the gourds, the squash, all the vegetables the children had worked so hard to plant were smashed to bits. I can't knock down a cloud and fix this, the Ziz cried. The Ziz flew home and sat in his own garden to think. He'd watched the children plant their vegetable garden. Every year they harvested the fruits to decorate the sukkah. What would the children do this year? The Ziz spread out his big wings and flew off to have a chat with God. The Ziz had a special place where he liked to talk to God. It was Mount Sinai. The Ziz was so huge that when he stood on Mount Sinai, his purple feathered head reached right up into heaven. "What have you done this time?" God asked as soon as he saw the Ziz. This was not the first time the Ziz had come to Mount Sinai after making a mistake. "I knocked over a big tree. It knocked another tree. That tree smashed a vegetable garden." "The children's garden?" God questioned. "Yes," the Ziz admitted, hanging his head. "That's a problem," God said. "I can't knock down a cloud and make this better." "No, you can't," God agreed. "What should I do?" "I want you to do something for me," God said. "Anything," the Ziz promised. "I want you to search the earth and bring back the hardest word." "The hardest word?" the Ziz questioned. "Yes," God answered. "Now go." The Ziz stretched his big wings and went off to search. He flew over mountains. He flew over trees. He flew over valleys. He flew over seas. Flap, flap, flap. I'm the biggest bird. Flap, flap, searching for the hardest word. After searching the whole day, the Ziz stopped to rest at the edge of a forest. In a little house nearby, he heard a mother and a child arguing. "I don't want to go to bed," the little boy said. "You need your rest," the mother said. "I'm not tired," the little boy cried. "Good night," the mother said firmly, closing the door. "That's it," Ziz flapped his wings. "The hardest word. I found it." Ziz flew as fast as he could to Mount Sinai. With great excitement, he put his bird feet down on the top and poked his purple feathered head up into heaven. "I found it. I found the hardest word." "What is it?" God asked. "It's good night. Every child hates that word." Ziz did a dance right on top of Mount Sinai. He loved being right. "Good night is a hard word for children," God agreed. I knew it, Ziz danced. "But there's another word, even harder," God said. "There is?" Ziz slumped over, disappointed. "There is," God declared. "Go and find it." So the Ziz spread out his mighty wings and went off to search. He flew over mountains. He flew over trees. He flew over valleys. He flew over seas. Flap, flap, flap. I'm the biggest bird. Flap, flap, searching for the hardest word. After searching all day, Ziz stopped at a big feast on the grounds of a castle. He listened. With so many people talking, he felt sure someone would say the hardest word. "I'm hungry," a little girl said to her mother. "May I have some pescetti, please?" The mother smiled. "Oh, you want spaghetti." "That's it," Ziz realized. "I've got it now." He spread out his great big wings and flew back to Mount Sinai. He planted his bird feet on the mountaintop and poked his purple feathered head into heaven. "I know the hardest word," he sang. "What is it?" God asked. "It's spaghetti." Ziz hopped up and down on one foot. Standing still was hard, especially when he was excited. "Spaghetti is a hard word to say," God agreed. "Didn't I tell you?" Ziz hopped some more. "But there's another word, even harder," God said. There is? Ziz slumped over, disappointed. There is, God declared. Go out and find it. The Ziz stretched his big wings and went back out to search. He flew over mountains. He flew over trees. He flew over valleys. He flew over seas. Flap, 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 I'm the biggest bird. Flap, flap, searching for the hardest word. The Ziz searched for 3 more days. He brought back lots of words to Mount Sinai. Words like rock, rhinoceros, ridiculous, and Rumpelstiltskin. Each time, God sent the Ziz back out to find another word. By the evening of Yom Kippur, the Ziz had brought over 100 words to Mount Sinai. God had not accepted any of them. The Ziz was discouraged. He had tried and tried. He flew back to Mount Sinai to have one more discussion with God. What word did you bring this time? God asked. No word, the Ziz said quietly. No word? God asked. No, the Ziz said sadly. I've come to say I'm sorry. I can't find the hardest word. You can't? God asked. No, the Ziz shook his head. I'm sorry. You're sorry? God asked. Yes, the Ziz nodded his big purple head. I'm sorry. Good job, God said. You found the hardest word. I did? Now the Ziz was confused. Yes, God said. The hardest word is sorry. While all the words you brought me were hard, sorry is the hardest. I already say I'm sorry on Yom Kippur, the Ziz said. Well, you should say it other times too, God answered. Like when I smashed the garden? Ziz asked. That's right, God said. The Ziz thanked God and pulled his purple feathered head out of heaven. Then he spread out his great big wings and flew back to the children's garden. On the way, he stopped at his own garden and gathered a big basket of fruits and vegetables for the children. It was time to say the hardest word. The end.
One of the most famous movie lines of all time comes from a 1970 movie, a drama called Love Story. And the line, said through tears, is, "Love means never having to say you're sorry." Just 2 years later, that very line was used again in another movie, this time a comedy called What's Up, Doc? This time, when someone says, love means never having to say you're sorry, another character replies, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. The fact that both movies, the drama and the comedy, starred the same actor, Ryan O'Neal, adds to the hilarity in the second movie. It's his character who replies, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Emotional maturity requires apologizing. None of us make our way through the world without saying or doing some things we come to regret and need to make amends for. We're in the middle of the high holy days of the Jewish tradition, which last 10 days total. The first 2 days were last week, the celebration of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, which began at sunset Monday and concluded Wednesday, also at sunset. These 10 days, also called the Days of Awe, conclude with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which will begin at sunset this coming Tuesday and conclude on Wednesday. The preparation for Yom Kippur is much more somber than the celebration of Rosh Hashanah that kicks off the high holy days. To prepare for Yom Kippur, you reflect on the past year and ask for forgiveness from those you have wronged. You atone for your transgressions if possible, and you seek reconciliation. Observant Jews will call friends during this time, asking for forgiveness for anything they might have done to cause hurt in the past year. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is a time of fasting, observation of Sabbath practices, and asking forgiveness from God for transgressions against God. By the close of Yom Kippur, you are ready to face the new year. The theology of the Yom Kippur practice is this: God offers forgiveness for transgressions against God, but only people can offer forgiveness for transgressions against people. Preparation for Yom Kippur is, I think, one of the most significant spiritual practices of any faith tradition. You request forgiveness from anyone you have wronged in the previous year, and you make amends or restitution if requested. In this way, you take responsibility for your actions, and you restore any relationships that have been broken. For those of us who are mostly unfamiliar with the Jewish faith, when we hear about forgiveness, we tend to focus more on the act of being forgiven rather than the practices of atonement. To atone for one's wrongs is to make amends, to make restitution. The word atonement quite literally means at one, to restore harmony and unity. As you use, we might most familiarly think of atonement as restoring right relationship. Atonement practices recognize that saying I'm sorry is often not enough. Something broken must be repaired. The person who causes the accident or the damage should be the person who pays for it, who buys a new item or pays for the repairs of the broken one. We saw that in the Yom Kippur story we just heard. The Ziz would repair what he had broken when he could. When he realized he couldn't repair the children's garden, he apologized and he brought his own basket of vegetables to share. He apologized and he made amends. He atoned. And it is the practice of Yom Kippur that you must forgive someone who asks for forgiveness and atones for what they've done. Who would you apologize to if you knew you would be forgiven? When we talk about apologies, many of us think first about people we wish would apologize to us, right? It may be natural to go first to those tender places that still feel hurt or anger. But the invitation of Yom Kippur is to think about who you owe an apology. Psychologist Karina Schumann has studied apologizing and how it impacts the person who apologizes. There's lots of studies and informations already about what it feels like to forgive and how freeing that can feel. But what does it feel like to apologize is what she wanted to know. And she has learned that apologies make us uncomfortable. And apologizing even makes us feel bad because we have to acknowledge that we aren't the person we want to be. For most of us, something like apologizing for bumping into someone is not a big deal because we don't have a strong identity built around being graceful or self-contained or what have you. It doesn't threaten our sense of self when we bump into someone. And so it's pretty easy to say, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. But when we let down a friend or a family member, that feels more unsettling. We want it to not be true. First off, we want to hear from the friend or family member that it wasn't a big deal or their feelings weren't hurt or there's no need to apologize, because we don't want to be that person who hurts friends and family, even unintentionally. As Karina Schumann describes it, to the extent that something you did threatens your self-image, especially as a moral person or a good partner, apologizing puts you in a tough situation. It calls additional attention to negative aspects of your behavior. A 2019 article on the website mindful.org provided this information. People who failed to apologize saw a rise in self-esteem and an increased sense of control and power over others compared to people who did apologize, a 2012 study found. In both cases, participants followed instructions from the researchers, not their own druthers. Why is this? It gives the recipient of the "I'm sorry" an opportunity to twist the knife. Ha, you realized you were wrong. And it also undermines value integrity, the confidence in one's goodness and the soundness of one's core beliefs. To put it a different way, you need to have strong self-esteem in order to apologize well. It is humbling to fall short of who we want to be. So this is my confession to draw from the Christian practice. During this pandemic, I forgot to attend a family gathering that was happening on Zoom. I had failed to write it in my calendar, and then I just forgot about it. When I realized a day later that I had missed it, I was devastated. I'm still devastated. My family is important to me, and being a person who flakes out on family is not how I see myself and not who I want to be. I emailed an apology to the host of the gathering, the person I had let down the most. I was aware that nothing I could do could change the fact that I had missed this event. There's no way to go back in time, no way to undo it. And I told her in my email that she did not need to respond to me. I knew that I wished that she would say, "Oh, it's okay, it's all right, it's no big deal." And I didn't want to put her in the position of feeling forced to say those things. That's also why I didn't talk to her in person, because I thought it would pressure her to say it was okay when it wasn't. I hoped she'd respond to the email anyway and say it was okay, but she didn't. So I've seen her since then several times. I know we're on good terms, so I know our relationship is not irreparably harmed. Our relationship is okay. And maybe I'll be able to talk with her about it someday, but I can't yet because it makes me cry. And again, I don't want to force her to have to try and make me feel better about my transgression. That's not what an apology is for. So I am looking for the chance to show her how important she is to me and looking for the chance to make amends. Apologies aren't easy or simple, and they don't necessarily make us feel good the way forgiving does. But apologies are how we repair and strengthen the bonds of relationship. They are how we acknowledge that we are self-aware of our own shortcomings and failings. And they are how we do the work of becoming the person we aspire to be. No wonder they aren't easy, but they are important. Inspired by Yom Kippur, Unitarian Universalist minister Rob Eller Isaacs has written a litany for atonement. Rob Eller Isaacs has written a litany for atonement. The reading of the litany is meant to be an annual and communal ritual, a reminder that forgiveness is something we need to receive and to offer over and over again. Some years we read this litany, and some years we sing this litany. And this morning you are invited to join in singing.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For remaining silent when a single word would have made a difference.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time our fears made us rigid and inaccessible.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that set us apart and alone.
Forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, evident or subtle, that have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
I think I told you 2 different start times for Yom Kippur this year, so I just want to be clear that it starts Wednesday evening. I think I misspoke one time. The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Christina Feldman writes, generosity lies at the heart of spiritual practice. Extending generosity to ourselves and others gladdens our heart, is a direct way of healing division, and brings joy. You are invited to text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, you get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And after you've entered that information one time when you've donated, you won't need to enter it again for subsequent donations. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And also know that you can make a text donation anytime. It doesn't need to be during the worship service. So the phone number will be on screen in a moment. I'll also put it in the chat box. Please give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. As Unitarian Universalists, we gather to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. invited to join me in the spirit of prayer. And I invite you to join me in a prayer posture that's suitable for us as Unitarian Universalists. Any variety of prayer postures might work for you, but one that we could all share is to place your left hand over your heart to acknowledge the individual and raise the right hand into the air to acknowledge our interdependence with each other. Another time to take a breath together. The words of our prayer come from Reverend Jude Geiger. Spirit of life, God of many names, source of love. Help us to enter this new year with a spirit of renewal. Open our hearts to the possibility of abundance. Open our hands to do the work of what the year brings to us with meaning and integrity, with care and love. Prepare our lips to speak with truth and care. All of these blessings will be needed to prepare the road ahead for justice and healing. We pause once more, as some do every day, to remember the lives lost 20 years ago on a Tuesday morning. We mourn the friends we can no longer greet. We hold in our hearts the families that are missing a parent, a sister, or son. We acknowledge that a new generation has seen its innocence of worldly anguish pass away. Knowing that each of us must wrestle with memory and loss in our own ways, we pray for strength of heart to face these difficulties with integrity. That we know deep down that a warm community sits all around us, ready to stretch out a hand so that the way ahead is a little bit less cumbersome, less solitary, less strange. May our memory and our grief not alter our prayerful convictions for a world of hope and love. May the harm done that fateful day not deter our spirits 1 inch from a path of building that world we dream about. May we not learn to become creatures of reaction, recreating harm in the world around us for the harm done in our cities and our plains. This morning, we keep close in our hearts the families and friends we once knew. We rejoice in those stories where a caregiver or sibling or daughter arrived home late at night to a welcoming, grateful family. We also rejoice for the congregations spread throughout this country who have learned to break bread and share in worship across religious aisles, who appreciate the shared messages of love and healing that are taught by Christians, by Jews, by Muslims, by religions the world throughout. It is in this spirit that the world may know peace. Amen. Our time of contemplation and somber reflection comes to a close. Let us return to the world rejoicing. Our closing hymn this morning is from our gray hymnal, a traditional Hebrew song singing Shabbat Shalom. We sang it at the opening of our service last week for Rosh Hashanah. The weekly Jewish Shabbat, the day of rest, begins Friday at sunset and concludes Saturday at sunset. Today is not Shabbat, but I consulted with our Jewish identified congregants and we agreed that singing this song together is fun. So let's do it. Please join in singing.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom,
Friendships are a joy, and they need attention and commitment. Love is a joy, and it needs attention and commitment. Community is a joy, and it needs attention and commitment. May we give freely and generously of ourselves. May we give attention and commitment to nourish, strengthen, and sustain the friendships, love, and community in our lives. What we give is a blessing. What we receive is a blessing. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. You are invited to close our time together by singing the well, and everyone is invited to coffee hour.